Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Deep Thoughts. Mr. Crow is all excited about the show. By the way, if you ever have to get rid of crows, a little trick from Kansas, you walk up to them, make sure they can see you, and you flap your arms. Not like you're trying to fly, but just in a kind of sweeping manner, and in their brain, a big-ass bird's coming to kill them, and they fly off. They might come back and return, but they're pretty goddamn smart, and they'll remember. This isn't a lesson in being a scarecrow. Today's episode is called The Shift. And I have no idea how I'm going to put this together, but I'll tell you this much. I don't think it's going to be hard because it's happening, and it's very important, and it's very exciting. At least for one section of society. And I'm going to have to go down some personal beliefs of my own about what I believe is causing the shift and where I think we can see it. But I'm going to ask you ahead of time, some of you, to have patience with me. If I happen to go against the grain of some of your instincts about where you think the shift is going. And you'll understand that because I'm going to talk about the shift in the United States of America as of November 8th. And if you weren't excited about the results, again, I just would say please have some patience in this episode because you're part of this game. Whether or not we're in complete agreement, which I'm not sure two people are, we have to figure out how to be more in agreement than in disagreement. Because what this title means is this. We keep talking about the awakening from time to time. I'm going to start calling it, from this particular perspective, the shift. And the shift means that the overall frequency of mankind is starting to shift. It is starting to change its overall frequency. Mankind, male, female, has collectively become absolutely exhausted when it comes to the formulas for how the ruling class have attempted to manipulate our thinking, to divide and conquer us. Now, as of November 8th, there's still a lot of divide popping up, but what is really nice about November 8th and the divide and the protests that happened afterwards is that at least we can see who is most confused by what has taken place. Now, what are the significant events that have occurred in, say, the last 6 months that represent what I believe to be a shift? And is this the first shift? Is this the first revolutionary thing that's happened in the last 10 years? Well, I think that there's something that's become apparent to me, and it wasn't apparent to me at all, so I want to share it with you because it's been a realization of mine through sheer serendipity of thinking, right? When we had a change from, say, George Bush Jr. to Barack Obama in 2008, we'd had 8 years of really a tough era. We had 9/11, we had all the responses to 9/11, and it just was an acidic 8 years, and it wouldn't have mattered had 9/11 been legit who was president. It just wouldn't have been a place where we would have thought back and said, how great is this, right? The beginning of the 2008/2009 inauguration, we had a huge recession that hit hard and destroyed literally tons and tons of businesses. Friends of mine lost millions of dollars of their personal life savings and that sort of stuff. Definitely not the responsibility of a president, of what they inherit and what have you. But there was a big perception that Shepard Fairey got a felony for, which is the hope poster and the hope message of Barack Obama. Now, I'm not going to really focus on Barack at all, so don't worry about it. But what I want you to focus on is the concept that we thought that the shift was occurring, or some people really thought the shift was occurring, not myself, of hope. I have a very brilliant friend of mine in Los Angeles who's a incredible, legendary filmmaker. And when Barack got into office, we were walking down the street together at lunch, and I said, I don't think this is going to change anything. And he stopped and he said, are you kidding me? He goes, that shows how ignorant you are that this hope message on a poster isn't going to change everyone, that the overall frequency of reality isn't going to change. And that's because this guy's looking for the sort of one-size-fits-all single solution, the quick fix. He really wanted that to take place. But now I've been frustrated with the hope message, and a lot of people have been frustrated with that, because for a lot of us, hope isn't anything, right? Hope is this mezzanine between taking action and not taking action. If someone is not trying to do anything and they're just being lazy, well, they're not doing anything. If someone is doing something, then we say that person is doing something. Hope is sort of in between. Hope is sort of an interesting notion of a society in stasis awaiting a socialistic handout. It really is. You're just kind of sitting there. Hope is not a call to action. Hope is just sitting there. So when that shift occurred, on the back of a word, hope, those that drove that into us, another round of fake politicians and fake leaders, selected by the Bilderberg Group, people who are part of all kinds of dark secret societies. They've shown up at all kinds of horrible events. Their whole past is shrouded, right? Their first executive order was to seal their own background, which is, we haven't seen that since the days of Hitler. And I'm not joking. So that was a ruse. That was another fake out. That was another round of society being so drunk on, I wish the world wasn't this bad, that they were willing to go 2 more rounds of hoping that if they just keep doing the same thing, that something was going to change. And finally society kind of felt it. And, I'm talking about a presidential election in the United States of America, but I'll tell you what, the fact that our friends in Britain finally voted for Article 50, they're cock-blocking over there because the ruling class is trying to backtrack, but I hope the Queen digs Article 50 as well. But we have the Brexit. And the only people that I've ever heard criticize such a thing are people that lack any knowledge of foreign policy, of currency creation, of the sovereignty that they've lost, the absolute disaster of the European Union. They are still living in that Obama hope poster gear in their mind, which is, we just need to close our eyes for long enough, and all of a sudden everything's going to change and be exactly the way we want it. And the funny irony about it is that by closing their eyes and keeping their mouths shut, they're not participating in the destination definition of where they want to be. If you said, if I came up to you and I said, well, if you could do anything you want in life, I'm a billionaire, I'm going to pay for whatever it is you want to do, you realize that if you just sit there and close your eyes and dream up a dream inside your head, but you never articulate it, you never say anything, that I won't know how to give you what you want. And even if you do tell me what you want, and I put a bunch of money on the table, I said, well, hopefully this will get you started, but you don't do anything. You just sit around and wait for it to be created for you and hand it to you. Nothing's going to happen. And we have been in that particular gear for a really, really long time. A really long time. And in the meantime, by the world becoming more and more scary, we have hid our head in the sand and become more docile, more pussified into doing anything about it. And the funny thing is in September 10th, 2001, we hadn't seen the horrors of terrorism. We've had a couple little close encounters. There's definitely been some wars that had some horrible things, but we felt like we were in charge even though we lost Vietnam. We won all the other wars according to ourselves, but we really hadn't had a renegade, invisible boogeyman running around the world, seemingly autonomous. Now we know it's funded by everyone who donates to the Hillary Foundation, the Clinton Foundation. But now we are educated. It is 15 years later, and we have had 15 years of them trying to shove as much terrorism down our nervous system as they possibly can. And you know what happened? Complete backlash. We are now numb to those visions. We are numb to so much. And even if they were to create an apocalypse, there's so many people watching apocalypse shows on television, I really don't think that the society would panic as much as they think that we will. Let's hope we don't get to that point. But there's a shift going on. And what's the shift? The shift is, by all means, the first step of many steps that need to take place. This change isn't over, right? Let's say you start a startup and the startup is worth billions of dollars, but it's day one and nobody knows that you're worth billions of dollars. But some investors come in and give you money, and right away you get a paycheck. And let's say you pay yourself handsomely. You pay yourself $150,000 a year, right? So you're getting a pretty fat paycheck every month, but you still don't have the cash out. You still don't have the billions of dollars. You still don't have anyone that knows you exist. You've got a long haul ahead of you to get to that big giant paycheck where you don't have to work anymore. And that's basically where we are. The British citizens, having pushed Brexit in, and of course they're trying to fight it, you guys have to fight this thing. And you have to support every single person that is for Brexit, because it's sovereignty, it's freedom. It's getting out of this guilt trip of insanity that globalism has to exist, that all the nations have to have zero borders. All that is, all the European Union is a mechanism for corporations to take over the world, because nation states keep corporations in check. So they're trying to knock down the nation borders and knock down all the regulations, centralize everything to make it easy for corporations to take over, for the richest people in the world to stay the richest people in the world, to write one law that says you can't press charges against anybody with this last name, to encapsulate them, to protect them, to quarantine them away from you, except you're going to suffer and they're not. The checks and balances that society requires to stay healthy is to have a bunch of different folks voting on their various regions of the world. Trust me, what Germany needs is different than what Italy needs, because Italy has more water around it. It's just that basic. I mean, that's just a little tiny metaphor, but they live in a different region of the world. Canada's needs are different than South Africa's needs. You can't have a global state push it all together. So now here's the thing. We have been sold tons of change, right? Tons and tons of change. But what the message is, I just want to pick on the 2008 switch over to Barack Obama, because it is the easiest way, I should say, for me to explain this to you. If you think you'd won the race, but the overt goal of winning the race was to do nothing but sit around and hope, then guess what changes? Nothing on your side of the fence. But now we've had some changes. When people voted for Brexit, think about it. What are they talking about? They're talking about gaining sovereign control of their country, gaining control over immigration that was just completely out of control, moving some of these, aggressive immigrants out of their country, taking back the control of their currency. They never got rid of their currency because they were smart. Now we need to see every other currency come back. The Deutschmark, the French franc. I mean, everything has to come back, period. Every single country in the EU has to Brexit out of it. But what happened in America recently? And this is where we're going to get into, obviously, some differences if you believe that someone else was a little bit more appealing to you. But we had a choice in this country to say a person who was an establishment politician, who didn't campaign on issues of any kind. She campaigned on a complete platform of emotion. Well, what was the hope poster? What is hope? It's an emotion. It is not a tangible action. It is just to sit there and do nothing feeling. Because the second you do something with your life, you're no longer in the hope envelope. You're actually doing something with your life. And so this whole, social justice warrior movement that was able to hide like cockroaches in the shadows of the kitchen of America. Finally, when a guy came along who actually wanted to do something, who said, my entire campaign is based on one principle: action, movement, doing something, fixing things, identifying things that we all know are broken, but that for some reason we're nearly going on half a century. I think we are. We're going on half a century where none of this stuff is being done. Taking care of our soldiers, right? That's over half a century old. That's a huge problem. Can you believe that Hillary Clinton didn't once mention taking care of the veterans? Do you know why that's the case? Because bankers create wars, and bankers don't want to pay for the pain and suffering that they create. They use you like cattle, right? There's two words that they use for us. Sheep when we follow them without using our brain, and cattle when we're too stupid to stay out of their wars. We're in a meat grinder every time we get in a war. So the definition, for me, for a shift goes like this. We now have had a paradigm shift in our brain, and we've taken political action to actually change something. But now I did a whole episode on Stockholm Syndrome, which is one of my best episodes, but we now have a group of people that are sort of stuck behind this rock in a hard place. And it's sort of the kiss of death of trying to be intellectual or smart or intelligent and being essentially proven to have been completely had. The other interesting thing about the social justice warrior is this massive entitlement, which I have an episode that'll air probably before this one or right after called Entitlement. But they protested after the election in the United States from a position of, please don't tell me I've been had, is sort of the undertow of everything that's happening. And how dare you tell me that what I thought was going to happen didn't happen. They literally expected to control reality while holding in a stasis pattern of hope. If you put Hillary Clinton into office, what agendas were you expecting to have happen besides World War III with Syria and Russia? Nothing. You couldn't have any other thought because she didn't campaign on any subject matter of any kind. She was to keep the system going in the same place it's been going, which means all of our education is going to continue to suck and become more and more expensive. The jobs continue to evaporate due to bad trade deals, and our foreign relations with other countries were going to continue to disintegrate, instigating war. But now let's back up a second here, because it's an exciting prospect that we have now seen the seed of shifting in the British government, which unfortunately also controls Scotland and Ireland. Power to the people in those two countries to break free and own their own world. I mean, they have to get along with their neighbors, of course, and I think it could be just a wonderful relationship between the three countries. And they could consider themselves Great Britain and be very proud of that. But to say, look, when you come to Glasgow, this is our world, this is our laws, we might run things different. And if you go to Ireland, same thing. But open borders, it's like us going to Canada back and forth, Mexico and back and forth, just got to have your passport. It'd be beautiful. It's kind of the way it is today, except, again, they run their own country. They determine their own laws. I don't think that either one of those countries have any radical philosophical differences where you're going to be able to go across the border and, do something heinous. We're all pretty cool these days. But now let's look at something really, really interesting here, because I'm an internet guy. I grew up without the internet. And then the interesting thing is, for my personal journey, is that I became an internet engineer pretty much right when it came into Silicon Valley. I kept looking at this internet thing between about 93 and 96 and playing with it because we had Google next door to the pharmaceutical company that I was working at. So I started using Google in about 93 in beta. But I still couldn't really understand what the hell I was looking at. I sure as hell wasn't going to put my credit card into a web page, which Amazon was the first one to do. But by 96, I got into programming this thing. I got to see it. And in my first year, which was interesting, I programmed a web server. I programmed many web clients, several websites. And so I always was able to see it from its just most meticulous level, packet transfers and page rendering and all that stuff. And so I was a geek on what was occurring. But what I was ignorant to for several years was the sort of Marshall McLuhan social impact of this new medium. And he always said, he goes, look, Marshall McLuhan's whole, he said many, many things for the near 100 years that he lived. If you haven't looked up this guy, you should. Look up his 1968 Playboy interview, Marshall McLuhan, 1968 Playboy. This article is about 10, 15 pages long, and believe me, you'll be exhausted after the first page. He is so brilliant. But you have to also understand how brilliant we were in 68 to be able to read this article. I guess maybe the boobies helped out. Such a great idea. Lure us into great intellectual thought through the nudity of women. Well, I can see some feminists coming after me now. So, but he said, he goes, look, it's not so much the information that we get that is important. That's obviously important. But his big thing was it's the medium by which you ingest the information that makes it even more important. And there goes the internet. But you're thinking now wait a minute, the first thought in someone's mind, if you were to rewind in 1996, when people barely had, modems, they barely had there was no ISDNs, no DSLs, no cable modems, everything was super duper slow. You had to dial up and log in and all that kind of stuff, right? It's where AOL made a gigantic sum of money. You're still looking at sparse information. The news networks were struggling to get online. So it was slow. The uptick was really, really slow. But you fast forward 10 years, which in the blink of history, especially as it comes to the maturing of media, it's a blink of an eye. It's a blink of an eye. 10 years? Nothing. But look at the absolute exponential growth of the change of the way that man took in information. It would be 2006 at that point. Now we have every news organization in full effect. We also have tremendous numbers of, millions and millions of bloggers. YouTube was created in the Bay Area in Hillsboro. The kid who did it lived like a couple blocks from me. Sells it off. Google tries to fight him, can't fight him, buys them, and then we have this amazing network now that's YouTube, right? We have people that have been sitting around waiting to tell the truth for decades, trying to, sell a book through a mailing list, trying to sell VHS tapes by buying little commercials on local television stations. And now they can create a blog, put a bunch of keywords in it. They can upload part of their video or all of their video to YouTube. All of this information that have been trying to get out and get circulated to the world starts getting circulated to the world. Boom, we have this huge influx of truth with a capital T, the good stuff. Now, obviously, the government figured this out very quickly and said, oh my God, we've got to disinfo this stuff now and provide arteries to mislead people away by portraying ourselves like the truthers, but then move away, which means we're going to have a certain margin of truth in what we're saying that lures people away, that blows people's minds because it is truth and you can use it to predict the future, and then a bunch of misleading stuff. Or we associate it with other crazy stuff and then you don't have a solid stream of reliable information, right? But here's the other thing. So you have this huge artery of truth coming out. And again, it gets disinfoed, and then we found a way to sift through the disinfo. And even now, we kind of have this technique of creating a collective consciousness, even if you're dealing with 100 people online, and you think that there's a shill, you think there's a dozen shills. What you end up finding out is that, no, they're just biased, they have the opinion, they believe things that aren't true, and so you're just really kind of sifting through without consciously being aware of it as to what are the frequencies that keep coming through that make sense to me, that when I use these ideas and these concepts in my life, it predicts the future and it predicts it accurately. That is the huge shift in the way we ingest information today in 2016. Here's another part of the shift. It used to be that we didn't have the internet and telegrams cost too much and the telephone cost too much, and so they were able to keep us all off kilter. In the United States of America, for instance, they could keep the state of, say, Georgia, I'm just picking that randomly because it's an East Coast state, but they could publish newspapers in Georgia and tell them that there was a war in Africa that wasn't really happening. And everyone in Georgia would believe that there's a war going on in Africa. No one in Georgia has the physical ability to go to Africa and confirm it's not occurring. And they could also ask for donations to fund this thing in Africa. Let's say that's about in 1890. Now, at the exact same year, what they could do back in that day is over here in California, where we're settling, it's really rustic, they could tell us that there's no war in the world. Everything's blissful. They could tell us that New York is being remade and buildings made of pure gold bars. And they, although you may not believe it, they would tell you a story. All the rich people in the world decided to pool up all their gold and build a whole city out of gold because they've always wanted to see that. Turns out there's a lot more gold in the world, and we would believe it. And the only way we wouldn't believe it is someone jumping on the Santa Fe Railroad and coming clear across the United States and saying, "No, I was just there and I didn't see anything like this at all." But then there'd still be some people to go, maybe you just didn't see it. Maybe it's in a different neighborhood. I mean, it can't be that big of a neighborhood. That absurd analogy is to let you know that they were able to keep us completely misinformed globally. They could lie to us globally. Because we couldn't confirm it, those lies became extremely powerful. There's the Rick Gervais movie where it's called The Invention of a Lie. It's based off of a Twilight Zone, which is like old Frisbee or whatever it's called. But there's a point in the movie where he just tells a girl that he has to have sex with her because if she doesn't have sex with him, he can die. And she immediately goes up with him in a hotel room and she's ready to have sex with him. And then he kind of chickens out. But the internet has absolutely positively stabilized the overall mind share of humanity. And I understand that at the same exact time, it has also revealed the groups that believe completely different than we do. But now here's the interesting thing. The interesting thing is that we obviously know that there are groups of folks that do not want you to have an opinion that differs from them. They do not want to hear your opinion because in their minds, they're going to understand that they are wrong, that they have usurped someone else's opinion to begin with, that they don't really have their own opinions. They've been taught their opinion by professors in colleges, by news outlets that are extremely biased. News outlets that make profit from what we call news, and they carry a bias that their editors have what Rod Serling called 1959 pre-censor the candidates that actually get on the news. We all know someone in our neighborhood or in our childhood that has always been full of shit, right? They don't think very much. They don't study facts very much. They hug official stories for everything because it makes them feel comfortable with life. It allows them to keep their head in the sand. The only effort that they express is an effort to not change their mind, to not ingest information. I've got plenty of these friends in my life, right? They don't want to hear any of the evidence about, how we didn't go to the moon. They don't want to see any physical proof. They don't want to talk to experts who have 30, 40 years of photography and director of photography and special effects backgrounds. They can look at the moon footage and go, dude, there's like 5 light sources on all the shots, and there's only one sun in space, right? What news agencies do is literally pluck these people out of institutions, out of schools. They try to find the Eagle Scout. They can't believe anything different because they are an absolute institutionalized brain. You can't become an Eagle Scout unless you follow the official story of everything. It's very tough for someone like that to break out of the mold. So then they get hired to deliver the news. And when the teleprompter says totally asinine, ridiculous things that can't be true, they have no mental prowess or ability to discern the information and say, I can't say these words. These are ridiculous. This is not what's happening. Why? How do I know that? Because I can walk out in the real world and observe a completely different planet than we're talking about. But now here's the thing with where we are today. I'm going to come at it from an American standpoint. Either you have a group of people that can communicate with you and debate issues, that can listen to opposing ideas and do research. And, the biggest people, the people that take the real high road of life, can actually self-educate themselves out of their own bad opinions. Those are the most intellectual people on this planet. They can do research and find out that they're wrong. They can make changes before anyone has to disagree with them verbally in any type of confrontation, right? And they can say, well, okay, I can understand where I got off on the wrong foot. I've done my research now. I had a bunch of people tell me opinions about an individual I've never met. I've had a bunch of individuals so bombard me with their message, I was unable to listen to this other guy's message. I guarantee you there's a bunch of people that cried for the 72 hours after Hillary Clinton lost, that if you were to put a gun to their head and say, have you listened to even 10 minutes of the opponent's speeches that weren't cut up by the media that's biased to your side, they would die. Because their answer would be no. And then the question is, well, how are you so sure you didn't like the other candidate when you wouldn't listen to anything that they said, when you were usurping what everyone else said? I've got very intelligent friends of mine that when they talk to me about Donald Trump, it is as if I am looking at some bizarre jukebox of all the sound bites that come out of the press. Well, now, how long can you tell a lie? How long can you deceive someone? How long? You ever ask that question? For those parents dealing with the trials and tribulations of make-believe characters that you must raise your kids into because the American culture says Santa Claus exists, Tooth Fairy exists, Easter Bunny exists, leprechauns exist, Sandman exists, etc., etc., you know that they have created for you a burden where you will as a parent have to tell your child that you have lied to them since they were born. No parent on earth likes that conversation with their child, but now think about it. Who made you lie? Or who suggested that you should lie? Let's say you're a parent that's a fairly progressive thinker and you want your child to grow up outside of the materialistic value system of Christmas. You don't want your child to judge you and curb their amount of love for you because you didn't get them enough presents and enough stuff. So you say, I'm not going to lie to my child. I'm not going to tell them that Santa Claus exists. I'm going to tell them that everyone else believes that Santa Claus exists at their age, up until a certain age. You're probably worried about several different things. You're worried that you're going to steal something from your child, this magical moment when they're young. You're going to worry that your child will tell another child. And then as soon as that parent finds out that you've been honest with your child, you're the asshole. It is a forced Stockholm syndrome. It is a forced emperor has clothes on metaphor to life. How sick is that? Now, I had never contemplated this when I was young and raising my kid. So believe me, if you continue with the game, I totally understand. But I think it's valuable to open up the conversation, right? But how long can you tell a lie? You can't tell it forever, usually. And let's just say there's some form of undeniable truth once we pass on to the other side. Every lie you've ever told becomes immediate truth to all of those that you have lied to. Your friends, your family, your people that you've met, your God, your relatives that have already passed on after you or before you, right? Every lie you've told is just right out there. It's nice that it seems like a lie has an expiration date. But the truth has no expiration date. The truth, how long can you keep the truth? You can keep that shit forever. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that beautiful that the universe seems to be an infinite construct of existence, right? Our consciousness, our souls, all seems to be forever. That's truth. But a lie, a forgery, a deception has a time limit. And so I am pretty sure that those that run the world and survive off deception understand this. And that is why they keep ratcheting up the game. You know, as soon as 9/11 happened, we had this CIA construct called Al-Qaeda. And by the way, I'm not convinced today that those three-letter acronyms, agencies, are exactly the same way they were back in 2001. That might be naive and hopeful on my part, but I think that what has occurred in the last 90 days shows me that somehow at a subatomic level, these organizations have sort of given themselves a new charter of perhaps closer to truth than deception. WikiLeaks getting all the emails is a really good sign that somewhere in the bowels of 16 intelligence agencies, they have given him everything it takes to start exposing these people at the top. It's a beautiful thing. I hope that they continue to re-engineer the world away from negativity, and they can regain the true definition and true patriotism that we've had for these organizations that may have been faux patriotism in the past. NSA people, FBI people, CIA people, MI6, MI5, Mossad, all you guys. You have the chance of completely giving yourself a new leaf in life right now, more than ever. It's beautiful. So do what you can to straighten out this place. Believe me, you personally, along with your families, will be way happier with a world that is happy. Don't worry about population control and all that kind of stuff. A person with money realizes destiny more than anything. And all those countries that are overpopulating, once they have once they have something to do other than fuck and create kids, their populations will go down like everyone else in the modern age, right? It'll be self-regulating. But what did they do? 9/11 occurs. We have this Al-Qaeda faction led by Osama bin Laden, boogeyman, blah, blah, blah. And then eventually they fake his death, which is complete bullshit. The guy died in 2001, December. But what did they do? They created ISIS. Or I should say Hillary Clinton created ISIS on behalf of those who told her what to do. What happened then? Because we got tired of the Al-Qaeda message. Everybody was just like, I don't give a shit about Al-Qaeda. We just got tired of hearing that same name, so they created a new boogeyman. And then what did they do to debut the new boogeyman? Well, they lied about their numbers. They lied about their income. They started doing these staged fake beheadings in sound stages. And eventually, after a dozen of those, even the CIA and the FBI had to come out and say, yeah, those are fake. Big mass beheadings were fake. The very first one was absolutely revealed as a complete fake when someone took a photograph, a movie of the set where they were creating that first beheading. That jihad guy, supposedly from Britain. Completely revealed as a fake. So then I think they started really killing people. There's a couple beheadings that my friends said they've seen that, turn their stomachs. And, okay, so they're starting to really kill people now. But we are sick and tired of anyone that fuels this system. And we know how to get rid of them. Believe me, we know how to wipe those motherfuckers off the map. Trust me. I guarantee you, anyone who's in those organizations right now, as long as we can get this president-elect into the office without some crazy bastard trying to kill him, they're going to put down their gun and they're going to go back to their poppy fields and they're going to be a farmer for the rest of their life. They're going to repair shoes. They're going to sell food on the street. They're going to get out of this game of signing up to fight for money because it's going to result in their absolute death. But they ratchet up their stories, their fiction, constantly. The massacres in America just kept getting ratcheted up and ratcheted up. The specific demographics that always suffered as a result of massacres in this country kept just ratcheting through the social justice warrior metaphors, right? Whatever group is a group, part of that group, there's a massacre that links itself to that group. But we now can dismantle those fake massacres in seconds. I mean, the people on the internet are so utterly amazing that they dive into these guys' individual backgrounds. Anyone who gives a face-to-face eyewitness testimony, we have their entire life history within 12 hours. Their IMDb acting portfolios, their demo reels, We have politicians that are corrupt, that have actually been charged with threatening to kill other politicians who provide key eyewitness stuff. We get every single piece of recorded footage. This is the shift, people. This is the complete shift that we have affected as society on society. I can't remember what episode I gave this in, okay? I think it's one that hasn't published yet, so it's going to be a little bit of a repeat, but this is very, very important to the shift notion, especially November 8th for the United States. I learned by the late 90s, after being a manager for about 4 months and having worked in the corporate world for about 12 years, that an org chart, an organizational chart for a corporation, which basically has a bunch of boxes that say this person, has this job, this title, this job, this title. This person reports to that person. There's a couple ways that these are created and a couple ways that these are implemented and thought of. One of them is effective and one of them is not effective. There are some people that just want the title. They want the title, they want the paycheck, and they want the prestige. They don't really want any of the work. But their little fragile egos want these sort of accomplishments. They keep trophies on their walls, of the positions that they've gained, of these organizations that they've worked for. But in terms of the tangible output of their position within the company, they don't care at all. If they can get away with doing nothing, they love it. They absolutely love it. Then there's my organizational chart method, which is I don't give a shit what your title is. I want to know what your position is and what you're responsible for. And we have to look at the entire company, chop it into pieces, logical pieces of discipline, right? Engineering over here, design over here, production right here, whatever. Operations, finance. You chop it up into a bunch of pieces. And then you have to figure out who can take those positions. How much can you fit comfortably in a single human's life, right? You don't want to overburden someone. So accounting, for instance, can usually survive under one person's command up to a certain point of sales, up to a certain point of processing people's expense reports and all their HR stuff. Eventually, you got to break HR out into its own entity. It starts with one person, then it ramps up 2, 3, 4, 5 as the company expands. But we don't give a shit what people are called. What we care about is what you're responsible for. What effect are you going to have on the company? That's what's important. Why mention that right now? Well, look at Hillary Clinton's entire campaign. She never put herself in a position ever in a campaign speech to ever have to accomplish or change anything. Her whole thing was everything is great. I'm going to start war with Syria and Russia. Soldiers are going to run out and do that job for me. My generals are going to figure out what to do with that mess. But I'm just going to be president. She was all about the job title. She did not burden herself in any of her campaign speeches to become anything. I mean, tell me where I'm wrong, but I've had the courage to watch hours and hours of her speeches, her green screen speeches when no one showed up, her 650 people that showed up for her LeBron James event, her walking on stage with 35,000 people that want to watch Bruce Springsteen sing a song, and her claiming that she was the reason why the crowd was there. Okay, well, there's this other guy, Donald Trump. What has every single speech since the guy declared his candidacy to his acceptance speech, what has every single speech had in common in terms of format? He has obligated himself in every speech to more than a dozen catastrophic, easy changes to this country to make things better, and some tough changes. But he has burdened himself in the eyes of the people to make changes, to take on the responsibility in my org chart of life, which is you don't get any titles unless you own shit. Another cool thing I like about the guy is that he constantly said, look, we have to make changes in a bunch of areas very, very quickly, and I'm only one guy. So he immediately regurgitated what I'm telling you, which is I'm going to hire the best experts in the world to go after this region, that region, this region, that region. The most brilliant minds who take into account both sides of the fence. Now again, the shift has chased a bunch of cockroaches out from behind the refrigerator in this country. So let's say you've got this two-party system in America, which is really not very good for us, the way it's set up, because we immediately have a divided country, and the press and the internet, the private for-profit press and the internet just incubate this stuff up where we end up disliking each other. At least the people that I know that are intelligent left-wingers, you would say, liberals, and the people that are intelligent right-wingers, conservatives, they're able to discuss things. They're able to sit down at a table and, within at least 5 to 10 minutes, they get all their emotional swings out of the way, and they end up having an intelligent debate about how to fix problems. But there's this tiny, tiny single percent of people in this country, most of the protesters that went out the day after the election, that have I would say, an historic inability to listen to what anyone else is saying. They cannot hear anything other than their deluded upbringing, their overprivileged upbringing, where they were able to get everything paid for by their families. As their families raised children that were of no use to society, the parents actually got embarrassed about their children and just kept shoveling money into their lives. So that when they are at their latest gathering and someone says, "How are your children?" they'll say, "Oh, they're doing great. They're in college." And if they come out of college and they can't get a job, so you end up, working at a Starbucks, their family, "Well, yeah, they're doing really good. They're just getting in the workforce and they're searching for a job. They're doing really well. Oh, yeah, they're sustaining themselves." But in the end, the parents are working overtime to correct a mistake with really no hope of actually fixing their child, because they're not participating in any intellectual thought, any upgrade to their thinking. They've lost complete control of their child, and perhaps they have the same problem themselves by just being overburdened with life. But when it comes to change in this country, the funny thing is a protest is a very interesting thing. If you're a protester with real solutions to problems, yeah, you probably have a value. Martin Luther King was a protester with a solution portfolio. And that's why he is so revered today. He was a brilliant man. His speeches weren't written down. He just pulled that stuff out of his ass, and he became one of the most brilliant leaders we've ever had. We don't protest like that anymore. We have people that protest down a street with the absolute diarrhea of the mouth of hate speech, claiming that what they are protesting against is hate speech or hate thought or whatever, right? The irony is amazing. But now here's the thing. What's the biggest problem with a bug infestation in your house? Well, if you've ever had one, you'll know that finding the infestation is the hardest part. These little bastards will not show themselves. That's how they got a foothold in your house in the first place. Anyone who's had cockroaches, you know that they hide in the dark. And when you flick on the light, they're all over the place. They sense the light. They know they're in trouble instinctively, and they go towards any shadow under the edge of a plate, behind an appliance. There you go. Now, some are like fleas, and they're so damn tiny you can't see them. But termites, ants. Ants are a little more bold. They're like, "Fuck you, we're going to eat this pancake syrup, whether you like it or not." But what's interesting about what's occurred in the last 7 days is that we've sort of had this festering cockroach infestation of uselessness come out into the light. It's been beautiful. It has been beautiful to see them pull themselves out into the light, thinking that they're actually making a profound statement, absolutely drunk on profound ignorance, lacking any scientific method to affect any change in anyone's mind, especially their own, which is how they got there in the first place. We always have this analogy we talk about where the ostrich supposedly hides his head in the sand if it gets scared. Now, I've never ever seen that happen in real life, and I don't know where all these holes are that ostriches seem to find. But if there was a way to cross that metaphor over to the social justice warriors of the United States of America, it is as if they have created a hat or a helmet they could put on that carries that sand over their eyes. And what's really fascinating is that they get together and they gather their sorrows and their inability to truly debate anything. They have no history of anything. They don't have any evidence from the other side of which they feel so certain is against them. And so when they debate, it's funny. It is the most unintellectual thing you've ever seen in your life. When you watch them talk among themselves and debate, or not even debate, but just hive mind their idiocy, there's no depth to anything that they've said. They go, "Well, he's a racist. Yeah, I know he's a racist. He's a racist. I know he's a racist." Never a reason why. Never any factual evidence. Never any evolutionary model in their mind of how someone might have misconstrued a piece of information. How even if you know a friend who might have been a little racist, but they moved to the big city, and 5 years later they realize they're not a racist, they would never record the historical event, the histogram of that person's growth. They just know, well, when he left Texas, he was a total racist, and he moved to San Francisco, and I just know he's a racist there. 10 years later, I know he's a racist. 20 years later, I know he's a racist. Never getting into his life. Guy could marry someone from a different race, proving that he's absolutely figured out he was full of shit. Now, the shift. is sort of that snowball I keep talking about, right? Is one thing, and I'll give you an analogy that totally makes this work. I've said several times that every place I've ever worked, I've had a fantastic boss, then a crappy boss, then a fantastic boss, and it just oscillated back and forth from about 1987 to 1996, right? It's almost 9 years. I was always underneath someone's thumb, and I either loved my boss or I hated my boss. And all the bosses that I liked always behaved the same, and all the bosses that I disliked were very randomly freaking dark. I've worked for some racist women, white women, that were trying to convince me that the CEO doesn't like black people, using the N-word in the conversation with me when I'm best friends with the CEO and he and I have a profound love for Motown and everything black culture. She's trying to tell me he's a racist. She was projecting. She was trying to usurp his opinion so she could manipulate me. I can't remember exactly where that was. I think she was talking about one of our employees that was black. She was projecting her own racism. And we're in the Bay Area, where it should be a big melting pot, right? But when I got to be a boss, when I got to manage a couple people, which I got very lucky. I managed 2 good friends of mine in my first little 3-man team, me being one of the 3. I immediately took every lesson I had learned from the great bosses and took, again, equal lesson from those who were the bad bosses and made sure that we had a great environment. And I managed for about 1.5 years. And then I left and joined a startup where I was, again, just an employee doing a bunch of stuff for them. Then I jumped into a group and managed 6 people, and then it became 20 people, and then it became 55 people. And I just kept applying. And by the way, when I went between being a manager and being a big director, I went to a company that had a bunch of crappy managers. Good people, but just really misguided in a lot of ways about taking responsibility. And when I went and worked for this big game company, I got a chance to really spread my wings beautifully. But here's the thing I want you to focus about in this story. It's not about me. The story is that I was unable to affect change as an employee. I just had to work and do what I do and do the best I can. But when I became a manager, I was able to make my own life great and hopefully make other people's lives great at the same time. But I also gave the employees a mechanism where they could make their life great as well, because I opened it up for group participation, for group think. Let's do the best we can do. Let's take the very best day that we've ever had in this department and make that our standard protocol for operation. And that's what I do every place I go. If it's a brand new organization, I just draw from my past to build the best protocol moving forward. But I'm always studying the flow of a day, the flow of production, the flow of excitement, and I try to embed that in my process. And I make it a very above board thing so everybody knows that that's the way we roll in this company. But now think about it. If we are living in a world of serfdom, if we're living in a world of status quo, where we want our leaders to own absolutely everything that we survive on, that we depend on, all of our strategic resources, if we want to say, we're not going to do anything to improve our life personally, we want it done for us, the Bernie Sanders thing, well, you're essentially adopting a philosophy where you will not be able to affect change. And you're investing all of your hopes and dreams and desires into someone that doesn't know you, removing your ability to affect your own life. Think about the people in Britain who have streets that have been sequestered by these fake Syrian immigrants, all these military, male-aged militants with Sharia law as their mantra. Okay, so there's someone in Britain that doesn't have one of those streets. And there's someone in Britain that does. And I'm not talking about the indigenous people that moved in and started businesses and that sort of thing. It's different. Specifically these immigrants. Well, the people that have this immigration down the street from them that have children, especially daughters, they feel utterly powerless before Brexit to get rid of that street. To say, this is complete bullshit. My relatives have all fought really hard to have ownership of this land, and now we have this George Soros thing, this European Union shoving these people down our throats and guilt-tripping us if we happen to care about the safety of our daughters. But now think about it. What's the mathematical model? The mathematical model is that most of Britain doesn't have proximity to one of these streets. Most of the women in Britain aren't threatened by this by this small group of people, but some are. So when you look at the parliament and they vote on things, well, they're like, well, 99% of Britain doesn't have a problem with the Sharia law folks that have moved in. And screw the 1%. They'll get over it. Eventually those people will be integrated into society. But Brexit came along. Nigel Farage came along. And they said, let's take back control. And Nigel was cool enough to say, hey, I'm not running for prime minister. I'm just trying to get this freedom restored to our country. An actionable item, the org chart of taking responsibility for something. If Article 50 goes through, then Britain will be in the org chart model where people can do things. They voted against having their country taken over by the European Union mainly, not by these immigrants, right? The immigrants are just a byproduct and a symptom of the overall cause. Well, in this country, we just chose to put a guy in the commander-in-chief's seat that is built on actionable items. Things that are so primitive to the survival and happiness of a culture, such as education, jobs. We do have this addiction to war, so we need to take care of our veterans. But everything in this country needs to be just very easily re-engineered. The thing is, when that is our commander-in-chief, and the commander-in-chief says, I'm not here to Bernie Sanders this thing. You're not going to sit in your house and do nothing. I'm going to provide the platform for destiny, the real American dream that he grew up with, that I grew up with. I'm only 47, but I grew up with an American dream. The other kids are not going to get a hold of, right? Unless we make this change. So now everyone has been shifted out of this position org chart into this responsibility org chart. And that's what society really is. It's actionable items. It's not emotional items. I'm going to tell you about a transformation. We'll go down the social justice warrior idea of things, right? I have a family member that I've mentioned a couple times that was not racist at all and became, I would say, fairly racist, right? I wouldn't say extremely racist or anything. I would consider extremely racist, meaning like you're talking about actually hurting people. You would join organizations like the Triple K. Nowhere near that kind of crap. But just an average conversation. This person scapegoats other races as the problem why his life sucks. But do you know why that person turned racist? This is my opinion, of course, but I can tell you I can mathematically map the number of racist comments this individual makes to his demise in life, his inaccessibility and sort of slippery slope, slipping out of his hands American dream. As the American dream just faded out of existence, his income diminished, his jobs diminished, his ease of life that he's had his whole life to always find a job and always find an income and earn more than his wife disappeared. Eventually the guy just retired because, well, that was easy. Just take some money from the state. You're living in a kind of hippie socialistic bubble now. The fight is over. The war is over. The battle's over. It was because his income went down that he would reach across the room in his mind and say, well, it's that guy's fault. And it always had a race attached to it, right? I don't even know if it was limited to any race. He just was kind of, again, a Tourette's syndrome patient of racism. The reason why I believe that the social justice warriors have risen up is they don't like their lives. They look in the mirror and they don't like their lives, right? There's the morbidly obese girl who showed up to a Milo event at Cambridge University, I think, in Massachusetts, with some other very intelligent folks. It's a very powerful little panel that they put together. But it's where the famous little viral video came out with this just incredibly morbidly obese girl was yelling and screaming and, again, didn't want to take any information in from anyone else. And her little video went viral, and beautifully that it did, because she absolutely, gut bombed her whole movement. It was beautiful. We finally got to see the cockroach. She is the queen cockroach of this group. It doesn't get any worse than her, right? One of the things that she screamed out was, there's no such thing as fat women. Okay, One of the comedians said, if you're the one screaming that there's no such thing as a fat woman, then you are a fat woman. He fired back. Now, I would have handled that differently myself, but it became apparent that this room was full of over at least a dozen people that didn't want to hear anyone else's opinions. They just came there to yell and shout and try to shut down other people's opinions. It was phenomenal to watch it. Well, this same group of people are the groups that walked down the street of America that said, I don't like the results of the vote, my entitlement isn't working anymore, and God damn it, I want it to go my way, and it's going to go my way, no matter what. Now, either one of two things is going to occur with people like her. They're going to be eaten alive until they absolutely just expire. They'll either just die of obesity, die of hatred, die of cancer from all the stress that they put on their system, feeling like they're a victim every single day they wake up. Trust me, the genetic system of the human body will move them out of the population by just natural attrition. And all these voices of all these Americans that remember the American dream, you have to understand the Midwest that voted predominantly for Trump, they grow up in a world where part of the American dream exists more so than in the big city, but they also remember because their relatives live a long time and they get to meet the relatives who are older. And they hive mind this, wow, really, Grandpa, the world was like that? And they're like, yes, you could learn something, work really hard, start your own business, bum, bum, bum. And so they're fighting to bring that back. And I can assure you that if the American dream was in full effect right now, and you could just go to school, you don't get all this crappy gender studies and all this victimization, feminist crap, you could just engage in academic. You didn't have a college telling you whether or not you're straight or gay, whether or not you were fat or thin. You just learned information. If the food in this country wasn't all GMO and over-sugared and corn-syruped, our weight average in this country would be so easy to maintain. When I was a kid, you didn't have morbidly obese people everywhere. Again, like I always say, there was that farmer's wife somewhere in the county. She didn't live in town, but she was the gigantic. They were the number 10, right? The guy who worked all day was skinny as a pole, and his wife was a gigantic round, number 0. They were the 10 couple, right? But now you can find that everywhere. But if America was stable like it used to be, where the food supply is good, the water's good, the air's good, the medicine is good, we don't get a bunch of cancer because we don't pollute our bodies, we don't have stress. It's a single income household, not a double income household. Women can go to work and it's all gravy for them. They can have more freedom to either work or not work. They can raise their own kids, which means they program the kids to respect the family unit so they don't have so many fights and disputes in the teenage years when they break free and they're conditioned by people like Katy fucking Perry or Beyonce, who's only black when white got boring for her, right? These kids wouldn't exist. I mean, they would exist, but they would be a completely different human being. They'd be highly, highly educated. Probably have several trade skills that they could just take a pick from. Hey, it's time for me to work. For whatever reason, I want to work. And I can do this, I can do that, I can do this. Trade skills, intellectual skills. Some of us intimately remember that world. Remembered people starting their own businesses just because they wanted to, and they didn't have to have $100,000 in the bank to take care of their rent and stuff. They could literally transition out of a job working for someone else, rent a space, order a bunch of product on credit with the bank backing them, and then boom, everyone walks in the door and goes, you were brilliant. You brought us an electronics store. You brought us a boot shop. You brought us a pizza place, whatever. You figured out something this town didn't have and you brought it, or you duplicated a service that was being overwhelmed by, or one business was overwhelmed and you diluted it out because there was more demand. Now here's the thing, because I'm going to wrap this up here. The world is a giant place. As much as it's getting smaller and smaller due to the internet communication backbone, it's still really big. Even if Great Britain and the United States of America are able to turn themselves around and get great leadership and great trade, we do know that there's a cascade effect of the haves and the have-nots, and that countries will follow suit. If Brexit's able to actually invoke Article 50, and believe me, they are trying to pull a bunch of shenanigans over there to make sure that Article 50 is turned down by the Parliament. You guys have to fight your ass off. to make sure that these people understand that you cannot take away the vote of the people by merely putting an injunction in, some insertion point where they don't have to do what you say, because that's what they've done. As long as you get your Article 50 and we get our Donald Trump in office, and again, the fix is just at stage 1, and we have no idea how many steps it's going to take to bring this country and this world and those 2 regions back to where it was 50, 60 years ago, minus racism, which will never be, we're never going to get rid of the civil rights movement, right? Beautiful thing is we've got all these lessons that we've learned about civil rights and a bunch of other equality issues, and now we're going to take all that equality and we're going to move it to a brand new format that smells like the past. But it's only going to smell like the past in the way of opportunity, right? In this country alone, the gays and lesbians have nothing to worry about, except that we're going to keep out people that want to kill them. That's important. Well, racism? Well, we'll see. How many white guys are going to be racist randomly against everyone else if they have everything that they need in life? It's going to go down because happiness will go up. And guess what? All these regions that live in ghettos and really broken urban areas, well, if we just rebuilt the roads, the bridges, all the stuff, the railroad tracks and everything in this country alone, there won't be enough people to do the work. There'll be so many jobs. And when these regions of the world that have been repressed and have no other opportunity to make a legal wage, all of a sudden have ample employment, they can work in their region because there's always a street, there's always a highway, there's always a road, there's always a bridge, a train track somewhere, airports. When there's always some of that next to you, you can wake up with your children, go to work, come home to your children, and go to sleep, and repeat it, and have a wonderful life. It's just so simple. But the world's a big place. We need to spread this idea of freedom, sovereignty, destiny to every region of the world. And we have to stop this ridiculous guilt trip about globalism. This ridiculous guilt trip that simply because you had an extra drumstick of chicken after you ate your meal and your whole family's full, that somehow you have to let an immigrant into your country to eat that extra drum of chicken. You don't. Wrap it up in tinfoil, put it in your refrigerator, eat it cold. Again, I think I said a long time ago, season 1, I'll repeat it here. I once talked to a very wealthy, brilliant man when I was probably about 18, 19 years old, when I first got to California. And I once said, well, I was looking at Greenpeace, watched my friends go into Greenpeace, a couple of them. And I was really saying this as a rhetorical statement, but the guy set me straight. I said, sometimes I feel like I should go off and join Greenpeace and go help dig ditches in Africa and whatever needs to occur in the world where these organizations exist. And the guy looked at me and he said, would you believe me if I told you that it's better that you can help them more from here, preserving the American dream and hoping that it gets to them, than going over there and helping them maintain poverty? It was a lot more complex than that, but that was the overall gist of what he said. I'm paraphrasing. And so I immediately took my money and started sponsoring various charities. It sponsored a kid, and then I found out that only 22 cents on the dollar was going to the kid, which pissed me off. We have a situation where, for me personally, I think that freedom, sovereignty, and destiny just got a big shot in the arm in the United States of America. And I have a lot of friends of mine that believe the same thing. But there seems to be this divide, this difference. And I would say the overwhelming minority of people are behaving badly, and the overwhelming majority of people are just breathing a sigh of relief, and they're ready to roll up their sleeves. In fact, they're rolling up their sleeves right now, getting ready to help those objectives happen in this country. However they can do it, right? But I have a contingency of friends that are gloating. They're gloating on Facebook. They're gloating everywhere they possibly can. If you see gloating in any institution that you think I'm involved with, it's not me. Okay, I do share various arteries with other people. Let's just put it that way. But this is not a time to gloat. I feel for the people that are the social justice warriors because in their mind they really are victims. It's easy to dismiss them. It's easy to say, well, they're beyond repair. Hey, you might be right. But these kids are so young. They're between the age of 18 and 22 on average. They're within they're within voting range, but they're within striking range of starting their lives. And we know that life has a really interesting way of settling idealistic minds, right? We want idealism, but we want it in practical areas that actually affect change, not just emotional arcs that make people upset or happy. So what I'm trying to do is say, look, get it all out of your system. We have to be patient with them. Because, quite frankly, in this day and age, I don't know what it's like to raise a kid. Well, actually, I kind of do, but I got lucky. I was very honest with my child, so she seems to have a very level head. But if I'd had 2 children, and one of them was 18 right now, kids aren't the same, right? Every parent knows that, right? You have 2 children, one's one way and the other is the other way. I could have another child who's between the age of 16 and 18 easily. They could be caught up in this social justice warrior thing. What am I going to do as a parent? Disown my child, my blood, my responsibility in life? The most important thing in my life are my children, right? No. But for whatever reason, their parents aren't able to help them. Perhaps their parents are just as disillusioned as they are, because perhaps they're overgrown children themselves. Okay, well, we can't just exterminate everyone that doesn't believe the way we believe. There have been countless people in history, especially during the civil rights movement in the United States of America. I've seen plenty of documentaries about the early 60s when segregation started to get abolished in America. And for those of you who don't know what that means, they used to put all the blacks in one school and all the whites in another school. Now, they're very intelligent PhD level sociologists and psychologists and educational people that think that that may actually be a good idea today, not for any racist reason, but to say that the cultures of different races actually absorb information differently. They have different perceptions of male-female roles. I've heard there's a brilliant guy in Chicago. I believe he was in Chicago or Detroit or something like that. I think it was Chicago. It was a black man that became a principal of a school that was predominantly black just because of its regional location, right? And he came into a really tough school, and there's been fictional movies that kind of plagiarize this guy's life, but he came in and was a very strong black male, and he realized very quickly that the classrooms that had the most rambunctious kids that refused to behave and refused to listen to the teacher were because there were females they're female teachers that were already there before the kids were there. And he would come in and with a big stick, being his personality, and get these kids to behave. And he started transitioning around the teachers and finding out that wherever the males were, the kids seemed to behave better. Now, we can say that that's racist, that's sexist, blah, 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 but if that works for that particular region of the world, Chicago, black males being more behaved around other black males, then we have to give them that opportunity to learn the way that they learn. Perhaps they only need a couple years of black male teachers that then start to teach them equality across the sexes, and such that 3 years later they can go into a classroom with a female teacher and behave. Feel like this woman is just as equal to any other male teacher that they've had. Again, that whole thing may have been just a little tiny microcosm reality for that area, but it seemed to be a reality. The documentaries revered this man for his innovation and just recognizing the sociological pattern of these kids. So these social justice warriors, right, they need to get out into the real world. They need to find out that the emotions will never generate a paycheck. The most cynical view about that would be they become a blogger where they're just a bunch of emotional writers. Maybe they could make a dime for a little while the trend exists. Well, there's a mass community that wants to listen to them. But I guarantee you, if this particular country, in Britain with Brexit, if it turns into a world where someone says you have to work or else, put something back into society, be positive, be productive, and all you're doing is being this emotional wart on society, their jobs will evaporate, even if they're able to cannibalize that defect in themselves to make money. At the Milo speech, it's not a speech really, but it's a Milo panel, I think it's Cambridge University, he said something brilliant, and Milo's interesting. He's a homosexual Republican. And he's extremely intelligent, very articulate. I sat and watched this guy talk, and my jaw was on the ground as to just how methodical his approach is to all things. And the whole panel was full of a couple other folks that were equally brilliant, but he has his own spin on things. But he told these kids in the audience, and I don't know how old that guy is, but he said most of you, your average age of everyone in this room is 20 years old. He says, what you have to know is that you know nothing. You know nothing. He repeated it over and over, and he goes, you haven't had to pay your own bills. You haven't had to get a job. So you're able to live in this sort of feedback loop of your emotional minds because there's no demand to do anything else with your life. And we know that life kicks your ass regardless of who you are, what race you are, how old you are, it kicks your ass. And when you start getting preoccupied with your responsibilities to exist in society, it takes away your time to think any other way. Plus, you tend to hive mind with people that are different than you because you can't say, hey, McDonald's, I'd like to work in your corporate wing in Chicago, and I only want to be with a bunch of other social justice warriors of morbidly obese white girls who are self-loathing. I need you to make me a wing of people exactly like myself. That's not the way it works. You have to integrate with society. So these kids will have a lot of this stuff shaken out of them, which is why we can have some patience and just look at the watch and go, okay, well, at least in a couple of years, most of the people I've seen on YouTube will have to get into society. And either they will be unemployed living in their parents' basement and out of our way completely, or they will start to integrate. Oh, but I was going to finish my story. During segregation, okay, we had a lot of videos, and you can watch them all day long if you watch old videos of segregation fracturing where the first black girl and black boy went to a white school, and it was a photographed event. It was a videotaped event, and you watch these kids get out of a school bus, and they look fantastic. They're dressed to the nines because we used to all dress up and look good when we went to school. And they're coming through this line. You had white people spitting on them, calling them the N-word, just being as vile as you could possibly be, as racist as you could possibly be, minus a lynching. And they interviewed the people. There was one woman, a white woman, that was a big subject of a documentary I saw 20 years ago. And they interviewed her, and they said, now what do you think about yourself? And this woman absolutely sobbed. She had been several years out of this racist bubble that she had gotten herself into, had been indoctrinated into, I guarantee you, by her racist parents, who were just ignorant. Never had to integrate before, so they didn't know how to do it, so they went with a violent name-calling thing, which is obviously how most of the social justice warriors operate. And I know that if anyone's watching me from that camp, they're saying, well, yeah, we're the people that's trying to integrate everyone. Don't accuse us of being this other person. But I guarantee you the flip side is true for them too. But this woman said, I was just misguided. And she sobbed because she was embarrassed as to what she had done. Well, I guarantee you our people today who are living in this weird mezzanine of unaccountability, of hope, are going to snap out of it. What happened in America and what happened in Brexit is that all these folks that have been living on this idea that someone else was going to fix the problem for them, that joining the EU was going to fix something, that letting President Barack Obama be the president and just executive order beyond the election process or the voting process, right? Which is really funny of my friends who really dislike Trump, is that the next day I heard one of my closest friends tell me, well, we're not going to let Trump do a bunch of executive orders to get all of his changes. And I looked at him and I said, what the fuck? Your guy just did that for 8 years solid, and you had no protests whatsoever when he absolutely gutted the sovereign rights of this country in doing so. Unbelievable how the standard flip-flops. We need to keep the shift going, and we need to temper our feeling of victory. There's all these movies where a fictional character will be fighting to get an opportunity in something. Either they're a band that's trying to get into a big audition to get a record contract, or it's an athlete that's trying to get into the Olympics, or it's something. Someone's trying to get to the championship game. Believe me, anyone's a Cubs fan will understand this in a really big way, as well as an Indians fan. But the Cubs is a baseball team here in America, Cleveland, Ohio. They hadn't won a World Series since 1908. That's a long time ago, man. And they got in, And everyone's really excited that they got to the World Series, right? The championship game. But now every single Cubs fan realized the war, or the battle to win, had just begun. That the team had to play amazingly. And it was such a tight race, such an amazing World Series. It's probably going to go down in history for the next 100 years as the very best World Series we've ever seen. And to all you Indians fans, I hope your team wins next year. But that's where we are. I'm not even sure we're in the World Series just yet, but maybe we are. Maybe it's just there. But we have no limit to how long we can fight this thing. I mean, a president only gets 4 years over here. So let's hope that there's enough change in those 4 years that he gets another 4 years, and that his ego is really not about his ego, that it's all about the changing of America. Hopefully it becomes a country where we feel like it's our country and not any individual's character. He's preached against his ego the entire time, so that's good. Brexit, you've got to get Article 50 invoked over there. Britain, my friends from Britain, if you can vote British in either Scotland or Ireland, you need to keep this Article 50 for being overlooked because you voted for it. And now you deserve to have it invoked. That's our homework. Our homework from this episode is going to last years. And if we are so fortunate to effect the change that we want, that we see, to bring back destinies, to rebuild the sovereignty of our countries, trust me, all of our partners out there are going to do great. China will do great if America's doing great. India will do great. Mexico will be doing great. Everyone will be doing better if we're doing better, because what happens in America, and Britain especially, affects the entire world. It affects the economy. It affects the overall happiness. In a lot of ways, without really wanting to be the template for the world, America is the template of the world, unfortunately. I know a lot of people will roll their eyes, but I'm not saying that has ever been the dream of any American that I've ever met. We would rather have the eyes off of us, to be honest with you. That's what fuels the irrational immigration here. Because we have everything, and boy, you just need to come here and it'll automatically be in your back pocket. What's really fascinating about the social justice warriors is that they're sort of taking oil and water and mixing it together and saying, see, this stuff will eventually blend together. And what I mean by that is that you have factions of the world that are the most intolerant factions on planet Earth. Or a woman's testimony is only worth half or a quarter of a man. Where if you were anything other than a straight heterosexual person, you're dead. And you're dead through a very painful means. But they are trying to say that that's the group that they represent because it's all about victimization, right? When if they enable that other group, they themselves will be eradicated from the world. Their DNA will literally be chopped up, burned up, and sent to the sun if these people have what they want. It's really weird, but I guarantee it'll all shake out in the end. So in closing, I'm just going to tell you the shift is upon us. This is not hope. This is not a bunch of bullshit emotions that result in nothing. The hope that America just voted for is a hope that will, well, let's put it this way. We didn't vote for hope. What we just voted for is change. And we have an itemized list of the things that we're going to change. If Article 50 gets invoked in Britain, it comes with a huge set of very simple objectives to change Britain back towards a more sovereign country. Now, there's still class structure and a bunch of other things in Britain that need to be worked out that aren't on the list, but I'll leave that to you guys. If you're in a country that is part of the European Union, you need to get out as soon as possible. And I don't think that's any mystery to anyone who's made it this far in the video. Germany is a great country. Italy, France, Spain, Norway, all these countries, Sweden, Switzerland, they're all amazing countries, all of you. Poland, the Ukraine. Not part of the EU just yet, well, sort of, right? But own your own region so that when we visit you, we get to see the beauty of your culture and your way. Hopefully there's no racism there. Hopefully it's just tolerance to the fact that everyone's so damn happy there's nothing else to do besides be happy. And when I meet you, I want you, and I don't care who you are on planet Earth, this is the kind of way I want to meet you. And it's almost a literal statement. If I have the privilege of ever meeting any of you, here's what I want to hear from you. I want you to detail the destiny that you're living, the destiny that you're going for. Maybe you're not quite there yet. Hopefully you never really reach your destiny in full, because believe me, I've done that a couple times, and it turns into a boring world very quickly, right? You always have to have something challenging you. But just, if you have so many opportunities, you can continually upgrade your destiny and set the bar higher. Every single year that you think you've become closer to your destiny, you will be one happy camper. I want to see a smile on your face and a glow in your eyes that says, dude, let me just tell you about this and this and this. And I want it to be so interesting. I want to live in the frequency of your happiness to the extent that 8-hour conversation goes by in 10 minutes. That's what happens to me in Los Angeles all the time. When I meet people that are doing something that they love, we'll sit and talk for 3 or 4 hours and it feels like an hour. Enough said, right? If you dig the series, please subscribe. If you dig this episode, please like. Leave your comments down below, because you guys are absolutely brilliant. I love everything you guys say. Again, just to tell you, if I up arrow your comment, that means I've read it. I don't always have time to respond, because I don't want to give you sort of formatted responses, right? I want to really make you feel like I heard you. For those of you who leave me a compliment, you say, dude, I like the show, please keep them coming. I try to say thank you to every single one of you. I know I miss you, but if I thumb up your comment, that means I'm just saying thank you so much for being here. I'm just one guy with an opinion, right? But this is an artery for us to hive mind. We barely have any trolls of any kind. In fact, I don't think we have any on the entire site. So it's cool. We do have a Facebook page, which is facebook.com/deepthoughtsradio. If you need the podcast of this in your car, it's hosted at mkultraradio.com. If you want to just see sort of the latest episode, you can go to deepthoughtsradio.com. If you're on a computer, if you're on your phone, it'll link it to YouTube or whatever you like. All right, take care of yourself and someone else. Let's keep that shift rolling, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.